Welcome, friend. Tonight dim the lights. Let the hum of a fan or the whisper of night air carry you, and settle into something comfortable. This is your time to drift. If you find yourself enjoying this calm little corner of history, you may consider liking and subscribing, but only if it feels right to you. And perhaps before you nod off, share in the comments where you're listening from and what time is there. It's always fascinating to see the little map of humanity our audience creates. Now, let's begin. You open your eyes in medieval France, not the glittering halls of kings and knights, but the mud-slick lanes of a peasant village. The rooster has crowed, not to serenade you, but to remind you that life is work, from dawn to dusk. Let us walk slowly through that world together. You wake slowly, not because your bed is especially comfortable, but because sleep in medieval France is more like a negotiation than a luxury. The straw beneath you shifts, prickling at your skin through the coarse wool of your tunic. What was once golden and fresh from the field has long since flattened into a mat that smells faintly of the H&Ms that once munched on it. A sweet, grassy scent lingers in the fibers. But it is mixed with less poetic notes, sweat, smoke, and the sour tang of damp earth. Congratulations! Your mattress doubles as a time capsule of farmyard life. You roll onto your side and feel something small hop against your ankle. That would be a flea. You're not alone in this bed, and you never really have been. Fleas, lice, and other opportunistic creatures are as constant as the sunrise, though far less charming. They nibble away without apology, turning your skin into a banquet. If you are very lucky, you might avoid too many bites tonight. But luck has a strange sense of humor in the Middle Ages. The itch is simply part of your morning routine. The straw rustles again as someone beside you stirs. It could be your spouse, your child, or your sibling. In poorer huts, even livestock might share the space, especially during colder months. A pig rooting softly in the corner is less strange than you might expect, provides warmth. And frankly, the pig doesn't complain. Privacy, that most modern of luxuries, is not something you can expect. Your body and your breath mingle with others, because survival requires togetherness. It is less your bed than the bed. The intimacy of the arrangement is practical, if not always restful. Above you, the roof sighs. Thatched reeds creak faintly in the breeze, and through a gap, a faint shaft of early light filters down. The hut is dim, more shadow than substance, with only the fire's smoldering embers, painting a dull red glow on the rough earthen floor. Smoke curls lazily, stubbornly refusing to leave through the small hole in the roof. It lingers, clinging to your clothes, your hair, your lungs. You breathe it in without complaint, because smoke, inconvenient as it is, keeps insects at bay and adds a measure of warmth. Think of it as an early medieval air freshener, except instead of pine or lavender, the scent is campfire with hints of cough. You stretch, and the movement reminds you of stiffness, your back, your arms, your neck, all marked by yesterday's labor. Beds do not cushion you here. They simply prevent you from lying directly on mud. The ache is familiar, expected, almost comforting in its predictability. To feel no ache at all would be more concerning. It would mean either you hadn't worked or you hadn't survived. Neither possibility seems realistic. Your stomach makes itself known with a low grumble. Hunger is less of an event and more of a background hum, always present. The thought of food pulls you gently from the warmth of the straw. You push the blanket aside, if you even had one, and step onto the packed earth of the floor. The ground is cool, and you can feel its roughness beneath your feet. A chicken clucks somewhere nearby, its feathers rustling as it shifts in the dimness. You are reminded that your home is not entirely human territory. The air inside the hut is still and heavy, tinged with the smell of sweat, smoke, and the faint musk of animals. Yet it is familiar, and familiarity is a kind of comfort. You know every sound. The slow breathing of your family, the occasional crackle of the fire, the faint patter of rain on the thatch if the weather is moody. Outside, the rooster crows, as though to announce that no matter how much you may wish otherwise, morning has arrived. The rooster does not care if you slept poorly. It is, in its own way, the original alarm clock, and unlike the modern ones, it cannot be snoozed. You push open the small wooden shutter, letting in a sliver of pale morning light. The air that enters is brisk and damp, carrying with it the earthy scent of wet soil and smoke from neighboring huts. You can hear muffled voices, the first stirrings of other villagers, as they, too, wake reluctantly from straw beds much like yours. The village rises together, because life is lived in chorus here, not in solos. You glance back at the bed one more time, the mess of straw, the shared warmth, the persistent fleas. It is not luxury, but it is life, and it has served its purpose. Now, your mind turns toward the day, and more specifically, to the question of food. What waits for you is not a feast, not even something you might grandly call breakfast, but it is something, and something is always better than nothing. And so, with the rooster still crowing and the smell of smoke clinging to your clothes, you step forward. The straw bed fades into the shadows behind you, replaced by the promise of a crust of bread, perhaps softened in ale. The day has begun, and your stomach insists you follow it toward the hearth. You shuffle toward the hearth, rubbing your eyes with the back of your hand. The fire is little more than a memory now, a bed of embers clinging to their last bit of heat. The air is cool, damp, and tinged with smoke that never quite leaves. You sit on a low stool, rough wood, polished smooth only by countless other weary bodies before yours. Before you lies the morning's feast, if you can call it that. A chunk of bread, yesterday's bread, already hardening into something more suitable for masonry than dining. You pick it up and feel the weight of it, the way it resists your fingers. Fresh bread is rare. Most days you live with this. Fourth, to soften it, you dip it into ale, the mild, weak kind brewed more for safety than intoxication. Water is not to be trusted. It often carries sickness. Ale, gently fermented, is safer, and besides, it makes the bread just soft enough not to crack a tooth. You chew slowly, the crust scratching against your gums, the taste a mixture of grain and earth. It is plain, filling enough to quiet your stomach, but never indulgent. The medieval version of cereal, except instead of sugar and milk, it's bitterness and effort. If fortune is on your side, there is something to accompany the bread. A scrap of cheese, hard and sharp, the kind that makes your jaw ache, or perhaps an onion, pungent and biting, enough to wake you more than the rooster ever could. On rare mornings, you might find a strip of salted fish, left over from yesterday's trade, its smell lingering in the air long after it's gone. But most mornings, it is just the bread, the ale, and the faint hum of your stomach, reminding you it had hoped for more. As you eat, you glance around the hut. Children stir from the straw, rubbing their eyes much like you did moments before. Their small hands reach for their share of the crusts, and you break pieces carefully, making sure each gets enough to hold them until midday. Hunger is not a private affair. It is a communal reality. You watch them chew with serious concentration, as if the act itself deserves reverence. And perhaps it does. Every mouthful feels like a small victory against the uncertainty of the seasons. The air inside the hut grows busier now. The pot clanks as someone fills it with water for later cooking. The faint smell of smoke deepens as the embers are coaxed back into flame. Outside, you hear the muffled bleating of a goat, the chatter of neighbors beginning their own day. The world stirs, and so do you. The bread is gone sooner than you'd like, leaving a dry echo on your tongue. You sip the ale to wash it down, its sour temp sharp but familiar. Your body feels steadier now, though not full. Satisfaction is not the point here, sustenance is. You eat not to indulge, but to survive. Survive you will, through whatever the fields and the Lord and the weather decide to hand you today. Still, in the quiet of the morning, you allow yourself a moment of thought. What would it be like to rise to bacon frying, 2 sweet cakes, 2 fruit? Such ideas are luxuries better suited to the tables of lords. You know your place, and your place is here, with hard bread softened in ale. The last crumbs fall from your hands onto the earthen floor, where they are quickly claimed by a chicken pecking nearby. Nothing goes to waste, not here, not ever. The fire is coaxed higher now, casting a warmer glow against the smoky walls. You stand, brush the crumbs from your lap, and stretch once more. The day awaits, and it will not wait patiently. Your stomach is quiet for now, though you know it will speak again soon. Breakfast has done its job, not to satisfy but to prepare you. Ahead lie fields, tools, and the endless negotiation with soil and sky. You step toward the door, pushing it open to let in the pale light of morning. The bread lingers on your tongue, but the plow lingers louder in your mind. You step outside into the cool morning air, bread still settling in your stomach. The village is already alive, though alive here means creaking, groaning, snorting, and coughing. The sounds of oxen waking mingle with the chatter of neighbors, each beginning their own weary ritual. Your eyes drift toward the fields, the patchwork of soil that dictates everything. You know, before you even pick up a tool, that today will be another long conversation with the earth. And the earth is a terrible listener. In your hand rests the simplest of companions, a wooden hoe, its handle smoothed by years of use, though the blade at the end looks more like a survivor of a long battle than a tool. Iron, when you can get it, feels almost like magic. A hoe with an iron edge cuts deeper, turns the soil with more authority. But iron is expensive, and your Lord Smith has other priorities. So most of your tools are patched and repatched, wood bound together with leather strips, iron tips sharpened until they are nubs. Your tools are more memory than material, but still they do the job most of the time. The ox, tethered nearby, snorts impatiently. Its broad shoulders and weary eyes tell you it knows what's coming. The plow harness lies coiled on the ground, worn and cracked, smelling faintly of sweat and hide. You lift it with a grunt, fastening it across the animal's chest, murmuring soft words to keep it steady. The ox doesn't care for your reassurances, but you give them anyway. After all, you're in this together. Without it, you are just one body scratching at the ground with a stick. With it, you have a chance at coaxing life from the soil. The plow itself is not elegant. It is wood, mostly, a beam and a crooked blade that cuts into the earth just enough to open a furrow. The handles splinter against your palms, but you grip them anyway. When you urge the ox forward, the plow lurches into the soil, resisting at first, then groaning as it tears a line through the clay. Stones clink against the blade, roots snag and pull, and your shoulders tense as you force it onward. Each step feels like a small victory against a very stubborn opponent. You sweat early, not because the sun is high, it's barely risen, because every inch of this land resists your effort. The soil itself is moody. Some patches are soft, damp from rain, yielding easily. Others are hard, compacted, refusing to break. You bend, stoop, kick stones aside, then coax the ox again. The rhythm builds. Step, heave, groan, furrow. Over and over, until the field begins to take shape. Behind you, the dark lines of freshly turned soil stretch out. Neat enough to please the eye, but you know it's only the first step. Planting, weeding, harvesting, they are all waiting further down the calendar. For now, the furrow is its own small accomplishment. The smell of earth rises, damp and mineral, mixing with the musk of the ox and the sweat gathering on your brow. It clings to your clothes, your skin, your breath. Soil becomes part of you, as if you are not just tilling it, but slowly dissolving into it. It's not romantic, it's relentless. You understand, the soil will give you food, but not without demanding a piece of you in return. Other villagers work nearby. You hear the rhythmic thunk of hoes, the scrape of wooden rakes pulling stones from furrows. Children scamper along the edges, gathering weeds or tossing pebbles at each other until a parent scolds them. The air is filled with small human noises, the soundtrack of persistence. No trumpets, no drums, just the constant chorus of effort against dirt. Sometimes, in rare moments of reflection, you consider the irony. You labor day after day, shaping the soil, but it never really belongs to you. The land is your Lord's. The tools often borrowed. What belongs to you is the work itself, the sweat, the bent back, the calluses hardening your palms. That is yours in full, and no one can take it. Still, you wonder, fleetingly, what it would feel like to hold a tool of gleaming iron, sharp and efficient, to feel the soil yield without such resistance. But wishing doesn't turn furrows. Only effort does. By midday, your shoulders ache, your palms burn, and your body reminds you that breakfast was more ceremony than substance. The ox, too, slows its pace, tail flicking irritably at flies. You pause, leaning against the handle of the plow, catching your breath. The furrows stretch out before you, imperfect, crooked in places, but there. Each one is a small promise of food to come. And as you stand there catching your breath, your thoughts turn from the furrows themselves to what they will one day yield. The bread, and the gruel, the endless cabbage that will fill your bowl. The tools are weary, the work unending. But this is the path that leads to food, and food is everything. So you shoulder the plow once more, because in the end, every furrow today is a crust of bread tomorrow. And soon, your mind drifts from the tools in your hands to the food they will someday deliver: bread, gruel, and dreams of meat you'll rarely taste. By the time the sun starts climbing higher, the smell of soil has fully settled into your skin. You can taste dust at the back of your throat, and your hands ache from clutching the plow and hoe. Naturally, your thoughts wander toward the one thing that makes all of this worth it, or at least survivable: food. Not feasts, not banquets, not the kind of meals you might imagine with golden goblets and roasted meats glistening in candlelight. No, for you. Food is bread, gruel, and the occasional vegetable with just enough life in it to remind you that variety exists. Bread is the crown jewel of your diet, though calling it a jewel is perhaps generous. Imagine a loaf that's more brick than pastry. It's heavy, dense, and has a crust that could chip a tooth if you're unlucky. Or if the baker was stingy with flour, but when you hold it in your hands, fresh from the oven, steam curling from its rough surface, you don't complain. That smell of warm yeast and earthiness is the medieval equivalent of comfort food. You tear into it, sometimes dipping it in broth, sometimes chewing it plain. Either way, the bread is never delicate. It's an anchor, something solid to weigh down your belly, so you can keep swinging a hoe tomorrow. Gruel is the other steady companion on your table. A bowl of oats, barley, or whatever grains survived storage without sprouting mold or being nibbled by rats. You pour water over it, maybe add a pinch of salt, if fortune smiles, and simmer it into a thick paste. It's warm, filling, and endlessly repetitive. If bread is the crown jewel, gruel is the gray stone. It's set in ordinary, dependable, a little boring, but without it, you'd starve. You don't eat gruel for pleasure. You eat it because your body needs fuel, and gruel delivers in the most straightforward way possible. Spoon after spoon, it fills you, and for a brief moment, you can almost pretend you've eaten well. And then there's cabbage. Cabbage is the stubborn plant that survives when almost nothing else will. Rowdy, leafy, and generous enough to keep showing up in your pot long after you're tired of seeing it. You chop it, you boil it, you stew it with whatever scraps you can spare. Its flavor is sharp, earthy, sometimes bitter, but it softens when cooked long enough. After days of gruel and bread, a leaf of cabbage feels like a luxury, a reminder that plants do, in fact, exist beyond grain. In lean years, you learn to be grateful for its persistence, even if your dreams are haunted by endless bowls of watery cabbage stew. Together, these three foods form the trinity of your diet: bread for weight, gruel for consistency, cabbage for color. Meat, of course, is something you've heard about, seen on the Lord's table during a feast day, or maybe tasted once when a hen got too old to lay eggs. But most of the time, meat is a rumor, drifting by in the smell of roasting from the manor kitchen. Your meals are humble, repetitive, and filling enough to keep you alive if not excited. Still, you make rituals of it. You gather with family at the wooden table, a rough board on legs, bowls, and trenchers spread out. The bread is broken, the gruel ladled, the cabbage passed around. Conversation is quiet, tired, but comforting. The food is shared, and in that sharing, it becomes more than just calories. It becomes the rhythm of your life. Each day bends around these moments: the first chew of bread, the steam rising from gruel, the soft wilt of cabbage leaves in the pot. Sometimes when the bread is fresh, the gruel has a pinch of herbs. The cabbage stew carries just a hint of onion or leek. You almost feel rich. These tiny variations are your luxuries, small reminders that even the simplest meal can surprise you when fortune allows. And yet, even as you eat, you know tomorrow will bring the same plate again. Bread, gruel, cabbage. Bread, gruel, cabbage. The cycle repeats, steady as the seasons. You dream of roasted meats, honeyed pastries, spiced wine, but wake up to the familiar trio waiting faithfully on your table.
Ow.
They do not dazzle, but they endure. With your belly filled if not thrilled, you lean back, wiping crumbs from your hands. Your thoughts wander from the food itself to the other, more delicate part of survival: drink. Because no matter how much bread you chew or cabbage you boil, you're still going to get thirsty. And in your world, thirst is a risky business. You may have just finished your own bowl of gruel and slice of bread, but as the day moves along, you are reminded that your meals are not the only ones that matter. There is another table, not far from your own, that gleams with more variety, more noise, and more importance. It belongs to your Lord. And while you may not sit at that table, you will certainly serve it. The manor hall is the opposite of your smoky hut. High beams stretch overhead, wooden walls lined with tapestries, meant to keep out drafts and display wealth at the same time. Long tables stretch down the hall, waiting for platters, pitchers, and trenchers to fill them. The smell here is different, not just smoke and sweat, but roasted meat, baked pies, and spiced wine drifting from the kitchen. It's almost unfair how quickly your stomach stirs at the scents, despite the cabbage stew you ate earlier. Serving the Lord's table is not just a chore, it is theater. You're part of the stage crew, the invisible hands that keep the performance flowing smoothly. Pitchers of ale must be ready, trenchers of bread stacked high, platters of roasted fowl carried without a stumble. You hold your breath when balancing a dish, because dropping even one could turn you from servant to Story, the clumsy one who ruined the feast, and stories linger longer than crumbs. The guests arrive with a hum of voices, boots clattering on the floor, cloaks tossed aside, see silk sleeves and fur collars, rings glinting on fingers that have never hauled a plow or mended a fence. The Lord sits at the high table, of course, elevated so that everyone remembers who holds the power here. His goblet is always fuller, his plate always richer. You don't question it, not as the way of things. But you notice it. You notice everything when you're the one pouring and fetching. The food itself borders on magical compared to your daily fare. Roasted pork, glistening with fat that crackles as it's carved. Platters of venison, seasoned with herbs you only know from their smell, not from your own kitchen. Bowls of pottage richer than your best gruel, thick with peas, beans, and imagine this bits of actual meat floating inside. Even pies arrive, their crusts golden and flaky, hiding fillings that steam and perfume the air when cut. To serve here is to stand in a haze of aromas that could make a saint break their fast. But serving also means watching without partaking. You hold the platter, you fill the cups, you clear the bones and crumbs. Sometimes, if fortune tilts in your direction, you may be allowed to eat the scraps littered the half-gnawed bone. It's the heel of a loaf, the cooled slice of pie forgotten at the edge of the table. To you, these leftovers taste like treasure. They are the flavors of another world, briefly borrowed. The work is constant, almost dizzying. You dart between kitchen and hall, balancing trays, bowing when spoken to, keeping your head low, but your hands quick. The kitchen itself is a frenzy, spits turning, pots bubbling, cooks shouting over the crackle of flames. Smoke stings your eyes, heat reddens your face, but you keep moving, because to serve the Lord's table is not optional. It is duty, and duty in this life is survival. There are lighter moments. Drunk Knight might joke with you, slurring his words as he asks for more ale. A child at the table might sneak you a smile, or even a crust under the bench. Sometimes if the Lord himself is in good humor, he may nod at you, a gesture so small, yet so heavy it feels like a reward. Other times there are sharp words if you are too slow, too clumsy, or too visible. You learn to move quietly, efficiently, almost like a shadow. And all the while as you serve, you can't help but compare. Their table is heavy with options. Yours at home is simple, repetitive. They laugh loudly, goblets clashing, grease shining on their lips. You chew slowly at home, careful with every crumb. The contrast is so stark it almost becomes amusing. Almost. When the feast winds down, the hall grows louder, messier. Bones litter the tables, puddles of wine stain the wood, and the air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the sweet decay of overindulgence. You begin clearing, scraping trenchers into buckets, wiping down the long boards. Your back aches, your feet throb, but the work does not end until the last guest staggers out and the Lord leaves his seat. Later, when you finally sit again, perhaps with a small pile of scraps before you, you taste the faint shadow of luxury. A bite of pork, a spoonful of rich pottage, a crust that flaked instead of crumbled. For a moment, you eat like they do, but only for a moment. Tomorrow, it will be bread, gruel, and cabbage again. And as you lick the grease from your fingers, you remember food fills the belly, but drink fills the spirit. And tomorrow, as every day, you will need to drink. Which brings you to the next matter: the curious world of medieval beverages. In medieval times, ale was the drink of choice for most people, as water was often unsafe. The wealthy enjoyed wine, mead, and spiced beverages, while peasants relied on small beer and ale for both nutrition and hydration. These fermented drinks were safer than water and provided essential sustenance in daily medieval life. The feast may be over, and the hall swept clean of bones and spilled wine. But the Lord's presence does not fade once you leave his manor. No matter where you go in the village, down the rutted paths across the fields, even kneeling at church, you live under the invisible gaze of the Lord. His eye is everywhere, not because he personally strolls through muddy lanes to watch you weed cabbage, but because his power seeps into every corner of your life. Your land, it isn't really yours. The hut you patched with straw, the strip of field you plow until your hands blister, the small garden where you coax onions from the soil, those belong to him. You are, in a sense, renting your life. The rent is not coins, because you rarely see coins at all. Instead, you pay with days of labor, hauling wood for his fires, fixing fences, harvesting his grain before you touch your own. You owe him hens at Easter, perhaps a piglet once in a while, and if you brew ale for your household, he may demand a share. Even your daughter's marriage might require his approval. A tiny nod of permission from a man who likely doesn't know her name. At first, this may sound like suffocation, and yes, it is. But it is also protection, at least in theory. The Lord's Hall is not just the place of feasts. It is also the fortress when raiders appear on the horizon, or when neighboring lords decide a patch of land looks tempting. His menadorms patrol the roads, his walls cast shadows that remind you day and night that there is someone above you whose business is power. In return for your labor and obedience, he keeps the wolves at bay. Both the four-legged kind, with sharp teeth, and the two-legged kind, with sharper swords. The relationship is not simple respect. It's a careful dance. You bow when he passes, you lower your eyes, you murmur the right titles. But beneath that, you nurse a private blend of gratitude and grumbling. Gratitude when his men chase off bandits. Grumbling when you hand over your best goose to his steward as tax. And heaven forbid you fail to deliver what's due. The penalties might be fines measured not in coins, but in taking yet another portion of your already thin supplies. Or worse, days of unpaid labor until your bones ache, and your own harvest wilts while you work his fields. The Lord himself is not always a tyrant in the modern sense. Sometimes he rides out on a horse, armor gleaming, offering a nod to those bent over the soil. That nod, meaningless to him, can fuel your stories for weeks. Other times, he is a distant figure, his decisions filtered through stewards and bailiffs. Men who know exactly how far they can push before the villagers mutter too loudly. And yet, even in this lopsided relationship, you notice something odd. You depend on him, but he depends on you too. Without your plowing, his table would be empty. Without your daughters spinning wool, his tapestries would unravel. Without your sons hauling grain, his granary would echo hollow. The pyramid of power may be tilted in his favor, but its base is built on your tired shoulders. You suspect he knows this, though he will never say it aloud. What makes life under his eye so exhausting is not just the obligations, but the uncertainty. A new decree could appear tomorrow. Higher dues, stricter rules, fewer rights. A careless word muttered in the wrong ear might be carried to the manor, reshaping your fortunes overnight. You learn to tread lightly, to smile when expected, to swallow complaints before they leave your tongue. In a way, you live not just under his eye, but inside his silence, watching for signs, guessing at moods, adjusting yourself like a candle flame in a draft. And yet, daily life cannot be all sighs and obligations. You still laugh with your neighbors while thatching a roof. You still sneak a joke when the steward isn't listening. You still find small freedoms in the cracks between duties. Because even under the Lord's eye, you are still yourself, a person with a voice, a family, and a stubborn streak that no amount of dues can extinguish. As the sun dips low and you trudge back from his fields to your own, you glance up at the manor on the hill. Its stone walls catch the last light, glowing briefly before the shadows claim them. You feel the weight of his gaze still, but you also feel the pull of something else, your own small patch of earth waiting for you. a place where, for a few hours, the Lord's eye cannot follow. And your only company is the steady comfort of your neighbors and kin. And those neighbors, those fellow peasants who share your burdens, your jokes, and your fleas, deserve a closer look. Guess, life under the Lord's eye is heavy, but life alongside your community is what makes it bearable. And so, tomorrow's sun will rise, not just on duty, but on the delicate threads of village life. When you step away from the manor's shadow, you find yourself in another kind of orbit, one not ruled by knights or stone walls, but by bells and incense. The church, small though it may be, has a gravity all its own. Its wooden beams and cold stone floor may not seem impressive compared to the Lord's hall, but its presence stretches beyond the walls. It shapes your week, your calendar, your thoughts, and sometimes even your fears. The bell rings, and you know it is time to gather. You shuffle along the muddy path with your neighbors, each of you dressed in your least-patched clothing, which still carries the smell of smoke and the faint musk of livestock. Inside, the air feels different, cooler, quieter, and tinged with the smell of beeswax candles mixed with damp stone. The priest stands ready, draped in vestments that shimmer faintly in the dim light, fabrics far too fine for you to imagine owning. His Latin words tumble forward like a stream, smooth and relentless. You don't understand the details, but you catch the rhythm, and the rhythm itself becomes a kind of comfort. The church's grip is gentle, but firm. It tells you when to celebrate and when to fast. It tells you when to marry, when to mourn, and when to rest. Sundays are the one day you do not labor in the fields, not because your body wouldn't, but because the church insists your soul shouldn't. Holy days, the year like small stars, sometimes offering a welcome break from toil, sometimes demanding long prayers when you'd rather be tending onions. And then there are the confessions. You kneel, murmur your sins to the priest, and await your penance. Sometimes it is prayer, sometimes a task, but always it reminds you that your soul is being tallied somewhere beyond this world. The Lord may own your land, but the church claims your eternity. That is a debt you cannot negotiate. Still, the church provides more than rules. It offers comfort in the dark, a candle against the unknown. When your child is sick, you pray before the wooden altar. When the harvest falters, you light another candle and hope heaven listens. The priest may scold you for missing Mass, but he will also sprinkle holy water on your newborn, bless your plow before planting, remind you gently that even suffering has a purpose. Whether you believe every word or not, it helps to think someone somewhere is keeping score in your favor. The church's grip is also communal. In its yard, you exchange greetings, gossip, and laughter with neighbors. The walls echo not only with chants, but also with the faint sound of children squirming and giggling during long sermons. The font holds not just water, but the shared sense that you belong to something larger than your hut, larger than your field, even larger than your Lord. You might not understand every word of Latin, but you understand the glance of your neighbor, the nod of the priest, the comfort of being one face among many. Of course, the church keeps its coffers full. Tithes are due, a portion of your harvest or coin if you are unlucky enough to find some in your hand. You give because everyone gives, because refusal is unthinkable, and because deep down, you'd rather not test what happens to a soul that skips its dues. The payment stings, but the alternative feels riskier still. At times, the church feels like a parent, patient, guiding, and sometimes strict. At other times, it feels like the air itself, invisible yet impossible to ignore. You can no more step outside its influence than you can stop breathing. It orders your days, shapes your seasons, and frames your future. Gentle, yes, but inescapable. As you leave the churchyard, the candles flickering out behind you, you feel both lighter and heavier. Lighter because confession has given you the illusion of a clean slate. Heavier because you know you'll stumble again, and the ledger will begin to refill. Yet the cycle continues, and in its familiarity, there is comfort. Walking back along the muddy road, you glance toward the fields waiting for your labor. Tomorrow, you will bend your back again to the soil. And that soil, stubborn and unyielding, deserves its own story because farming in medieval France was more than work. It was the rhythm of survival itself. After so many days of bent backs in the fields and bowed heads in church, a different rhythm stirs the village. It comes not from the steady toll of bells or the monotonous scrape of hoe against soil, but from the rising hum of voices, hooves, and barter. Today is market day. The village feels alive in a way it doesn't on ordinary mornings. Paths that usually echo only with crows and clattering pails now thrum with footsteps. Neighbors who normally pass with a nod and a muttered word suddenly walk with baskets, sacks, and bundles, all of them bound toward the square. Children skip ahead, tugging at sleeves, eager to see sights beyond their usual horizon of huts and fields. Even you feel the lift of odd anticipation, like stepping into a festival, even though this is just the necessary business of survival. The market is not grand, not the kind you might imagine in Paris with its spires looming overhead. This is smaller, muddier, and more fragrant in the honest way of sweat, hay, and roasting meat. Stalls are little more than tables, some nothing but blankets spread on the ground. A jumble of sights greets you: wicker baskets overflowing with onions, earthenware pots lined neatly in rows, bolts of coarse cloth folded like treasures, and cages of squawking chickens that complain louder than their owners. Everywhere there is sound. Sellers calling out their wares in voices that rise and overlap, bargaining cries as neighbors test each other's patience with haggled prices. The clink of coins rare and thrilling changing hands. It is not so much noise as a woven fabric of human presence, each thread pulling you deeper into the day's energy. You notice the rhythm of it, a steady hum, rising with disputes, then dropping again into murmurs, only to flare back up when someone lands a bargain. Food lures you most, even if you know your purse is thin. A baker has laid out loaves, crusts browned and crackling, the smell alone nearly worth the walk. Beside him, a brewer offers mugs of ale, frothy and warm, the kind of drink that could turn even cabbage stew into a feast. Somewhere nearby, a spit roasts over a fire, the fat dripping into the flames with a hiss that makes everyone glance longingly in its direction. You may not buy, but you can smell, and sometimes smelling is almost enough. Almost. The market is also where news travels faster than carts on the road. A peddler speaks of a far-off town raided by bandits. Another mutters about taxes climbing higher. A traveler mentions a saint's relics paraded in a neighboring village. You catch only pieces, but they form a patchwork of a world far larger than your fields. For a moment, your own hut feels both very small and very safe. Of course, the market is also a stage for appearances. You notice the steward from the manor inspecting goods with a critical eye, ensuring the Lord's table will be well stocked. The priest passes through, his presence a reminder that tithes are not forgotten even here. Mothers tug at children's arms to keep them from wandering, while young men straighten their tunics when certain eyes drift their way. Market day is as much about being seen as it is about buying. You may bring something of your own: a basket of eggs, a bundle of herbs, or perhaps a few rough-woven cloths spun over winter evenings. Selling them might mean you return home with a handful of coins jingling in your pouch, or more often, that you trade for salt, oil, or a rare bit of fish. Coins are useful, but barter is the language most people speak here. You give what you have, you take what you need, and everyone leaves with a story of either triumph or mild grumbling. By midday, the square swells to its busiest, voices rising until the whole place feels like a hive. Then, slowly, it ebbs. Deals are made, baskets empty, chickens cluck more quietly in their cages as they dwindle. People drift back along the paths, faces flushed, arms heavier with purchases or lighter with the absence of goods. The hum fades, the square empties, and the mud begins to settle again. As you walk home, basket on your arm, the day lingers in your head. The sound of coins, the smell of roasting meat, the laughter of neighbors, all of it a reminder that even in a life bound by toil, there are moments of exchange, connection, and a taste of the wider world. Market day is more than business. It is proof that life is not just plowing and praying. It is trading, talking, and touching something beyond your hut. And when you step back into your home, laying down your purchases, your gaze falls on your children or siblings. For them, the day's bustle holds even more wonder, because their lives are still forming, still filled with questions. And so, naturally, the story turns next to childhood in medieval France, where play, chores, and growing up were all bound tightly together. When you step inside your hut at the end of a long day, you are never truly alone. Even if your family is their children drowsy by the fire, your partner mending a torn tunic, share your space with a host of less talkative companions. Some are helpful, some are nuisances, and some are just part of the background hum of medieval life. In this small, smoky world, animals are not kept politely in barns and pens. They live with you, beside you, sometimes practically on top of you. The most obvious roommates are the larger ones. A cow may be tethered in the corner, her warm breath fogging in the chill air, her heavy body radiating a heat that takes the edge off winter's bite. A pig may grunt from the other side of the room, rooting around in straw that is also your bedding. Chickens perch anywhere they please, occasionally fluttering to the rafters, occasionally leaving you small, unwelcome gifts on the floor. They are noisy, yes, but their eggs are worth the occasional midnight squawk. You might wrinkle your nose at this arrangement, but think of the alternative: sleeping without them in the drafty hut. Their bodies are heaters, their presence a form of insurance. A pig fattening at your side is winter food in the making, a cow's milk tomorrow's meal. In some ways it is like living with walking larders, though less convenient and far noisier. The smells, of course, are constant dung, mingling with wood smoke, sour milk with sweat. To your nose, born to it, it is simply home. To a modern visitor, it would be a sensory assault worth remembering forever. And then there are the smaller creatures. Cats, if you are lucky, patrol the shadows, sleek hunters keeping the mouse population under control. Mice themselves, however, are winning more often than not, nibbling at your grain sacks with an enthusiasm unmatched by any dinner guest. Dogs linger near the door, half guard, half scavenger, quick to bark at strangers, but quicker still to steal a bone from your stew if given the chance. They may not look like sleek modern breeds. They are scruffy, lean, and practical, bred more for barking than for beauty. Of course, not all your cohabitants are invited. Fleas thrive in the straw bedding, hopping from animal to human and back again with cheerful persistence. Lice make their homes in your hair and clothing, requiring frequent scratching and occasional combing sessions by firelight. Rats sometimes scurry boldly across the floor, unworried by your curses. They are pests, yes, but also fellow survivors in this close-knit ecosystem of fur, feathers, and frustration. Congratulations, your bed now comes with complimentary livestock. This mingling of humans and beasts is not a matter of sentimentality. You do not think of your cow as a pet, nor your pig as a family member. They are assets, part of the ledger of survival, just as much as your hoe or your plow. But in sharing your one-room world with them, a strange familiarity forms. The steady chewing of a cow at night can be oddly soothing, like a heartbeat in the dark. The scratch of chickens settling into roosts is the soundtrack of evening. Even the pig's snorts have a rhythm that becomes as ordinary as breathing. Children grow up surrounded by this blur of human and animal life. To them, a chicken hopping on the bed or a goat nudging its way inside is not chaos, it is childhood. They play among the animals, mimic their sounds, learn early which horns to avoid and which tails to tug gently. The line between household and barnyard is so thin it barely exists. And so you live, woven into this patchwork of creatures. You wake with their noises, you sleep with their warmth, you carry their smell into the fields. Your hut is not a clean, quiet retreat, but a shared shelter where survival takes precedence over boundaries. If modern comfort is separation, medieval comfort is togetherness, however fragrant it may be. Not all of life is spent in the hut. Some days, you rise and join your neighbors for work that spills beyond your door and into the fields. Because while animals share your home, it is your human neighbors who share your burdens. That is where the rhythm of village cooperation takes its turn. Step outside your smoky little hut, brushing a bit of straw from your tunic, and you'll see that your home is not an island. It is one among many, clustered together like a patch of mushrooms after rain. Each hut looks remarkably like the next wattle and daub walls, timber frames, thatched roofs leaning slightly one way or another, as though they VA'd had a few too many ales at the tavern. There's no real street plan, no neat rows. The huts gather themselves loosely around paths worn into the earth by feet, hooves and cartwheels, creating a village that is more grown than designed. From a distance, the cluster of huts looks almost picturesque. golden thatch catching the sun. Thin curls of smoke rising in uneven lines, the faint sound of animals lowing or clucking. Step closer, though, and the romance wears off quickly. The smell reaches you before the people do, a mixture of manure, smoke, cooking cabbage, and the indefinable funk of damp straw and unwashed wool. It is a smell you no longer notice, but one that defines the very air of your world. Each hut is modest, usually just a single room, perhaps two if the family is particularly fortunate. They lean toward practicality rather than beauty. Walls are patched where daub has crumbled, roofs are rethatched when the weather has eaten holes through them. A hut is not permanent in the way stone is, requires care, and more often than not, rebuilding after a few decades. Your descendants will not inherit a home so much as the right to build another one in the same spot. Inside, each hut resembles yours in its essential chaos. Hearth in the center, smoke struggling to escape through a hole in the roof, straw bedding tucked into corners, benches or stools clustered near the warmth. Sometimes you pass by a hut with its door open and catch a glimpse of its life. Children squabbling over a scrap of bread, a woman stirring a pot of gruel, a man repairing a wooden handle. You see yourself mirrored again and again in these little boxes of survival. Paths between the huts are narrow, muddy, more often than dry, and littered with the detritus of village life, broken bits of pottery, chicken feathers, puddles where pigs have wallowed. It is not the tidy cobbled street of a romantic tale, but a patchwork of well-trodden ground that tells you where people walk most often. Here a path to the fields, there a trail to the church, another meandering line toward the Lord's manor on the rise. You could walk them blindfolded and still know where you were going. Guided by the dips in the earth and the sound of familiar lives around you. The huts themselves are close enough that you hear nearly everything your neighbors do. Privacy is a concept more than a reality. You hear coughs in the night, arguments muffled by straw, babies crying across the way. When someone sneezes, you may as well say, "Bless you," through your own wall. Eye secrets are rare, gossip plentiful, and life shared whether you wish it or not. Yet, there is comfort in this closeness. You are never truly alone. If your roof begins to sag, a neighbor might help repair it, knowing you will return the favor when their hearth smokes them half blind. If your pig escapes, half the village joins the chase. It's not out of kindness, but because a loose pig in muddy lanes is everyone's problem. These huts are not only dwellings, they are nodes in the web of village survival, bound together by need, obligation, and the unavoidable intimacy of cramped space. Sometimes when the evening falls and fires glow from every doorway, the huts take on a strange beauty. The smoke hangs low, the thatch catches the last of the sunset, and the murmur of voices drifts together into a lullaby of the village. It is not a grand sight, but it is a human one. Each little hut is a story, a small flame in the dark. And beyond the circle of huts lies the Lord's manor, looming in its size and order. Compared to your humble dwelling, it is almost another world. But for now, you remain among your own kind, surrounded by the everyday sounds and smells of village hutsure, world in miniature, fragile but familiar. Soon enough, you will look upward toward the larger house on the hill, where authority lives and feasts. The manor's presence shapes everything in your village.
Ow.
Even if you spend most of your time in the shadows of your thatched neighbors. Life in the village is never quiet, not truly. Even if the fields stretch wide and the forest looms dark and silent beyond, the human noise within the cluster of huts keeps things lively. Gossip, quarrels, laughter, and whispered confessions float constantly on the smoky air. As much a part of daily survival as bread or ale, in such close quarters you cannot escape the lives of others, nor are they yours. Privacy is an exotic luxury, like silk or cinnamons, something you've heard of, but never really expected to experience. Gossip is the lifeblood of this world. You know who left their fields unweeded, who watered down their ale before selling it, who stole a glance at the Lord's daughter during Sunday Mass? Tales slip from mouth to mouth with the ease of wind through thatch. News travels faster than a horse, though it often arrives somewhat reshaped by the journey. What began as a chicken went missing might, by evening, have turned into the miller's boy has a taste for poultry thievery. You do not check a news scroll. You do not refresh a glowing screen. Your updates arrive in the form of sharp whispers, sly jokes, and knowing looks. Quarrels naturally follow closely behind. When resources are scarce, tempers flare quickly. A boundary line between fields can spark weeks of muttering, escalating into a shouting match by the church door. A borrowed tool not returned in time is grounds for a bitter feud. Even the behavior of animals leads to discord. If your pig tramples your neighbor's cabbages, prepare for a lecture that may last longer than the cabbage crop itself. The arguments rarely become violent, but they simmer in the air like smoke from damp wood acrid, persistent, unavoidable. And yet, these quarrels do not fracture the village completely. Beneath the tension runs an unshakable truth. You need each other. That neighbor whose voice you re-sick of hearing will still lend you an ox when your plow breaks. That gossipy woman who exaggerated your misfortune last week will still bring a hot drink when your child falls ill. Bonds grow strong, not despite the bickering, but through it. It is the rhythm of life irritation, followed by necessity, resentment softened by cooperation. On feast days, quarrels often fade into merriment. You find yourself sitting beside someone you argued with last week, sharing bread, ale, and laughter under the same roof. By the time the fiddles begin to play and feet stamp the earthen floor, grudges are loosened, if not forgotten. The music works like a temporary truce, and in the morning you may even smile at the neighbor you once swore you'd avoid forever. Survival requires short memories. The bonds of kinship extend beyond your immediate family. Godparents, cousins, in-laws will weave into the fabric of obligation and support. When a child is born, half the village feels invested. When a marriage is celebrated, everyone dances. Even death, which comes often and without ceremony, becomes a shared burden. Neighbors gather, pray, and carry the body to rest. As though to remind each other that while life is fragile, community endures. And so you live in this swirl of closeness, words exchanged by the well, glances traded at mass, arguments shouted across hedges. It is a life of constant contact, of knowing too much about your neighbors, but relying on them all the same. In the quiet hours, when the fields are empty and the huts dim, you may find yourself reflecting on this odd balance of tension and trust. The village is never truly at peace, but it is always whole. Like the thatch that covers your roof, the bonds between people are messy, uneven, and full of gaps, but together they keep out the rain. Soon, though, your thoughts will turn beyond the villagers to the wider world of obligation, because while neighbors may shape your daily life, it is the Lord's demands that shape your destiny. It begins the way most unsettling news begins in your village. Not with a trumpet, not with a written decree, but with a murmur carried by someone's cousin, as brother, who once carted hay past the manor gates, a whisper of war. You hear it first as a rumor at the well, a half-joking remark as someone fills their bucket, then again from an old man by the fire who swears he remembers the last levy. It creeps into your ears like a draft through the cracks of your hut, uninvited but impossible to ignore. The word war has a particular chill to it here. You don't imagine maps, grand strategies, or banners rippling in the wind. Those belong to the lords. For you, the thought means something more immediate. Fields left untended, livestock unguarded, sons pulled away from their homes, and if the news is very bad, hungry men in armor marching through the village, taking what they please. The peasant's share of war is not glory. It is the quiet hollow of absence and the ache of uncertainty. The whispers grow thicker as the days pass. You hear that the neighboring lord has quarreled with your own over land, or perhaps over taxes, or perhaps simply over pride. The details are fuzzy, but the consequences will not be. Armies are not conjured out of thin air. They are built from the hands and backs of men like you. If the call comes, you will be expected to march, armed with whatever weapon the manor provides, or whatever tool you can swing convincingly in battle. A scythe, after all, cuts more than wheat. The mood of the village shifts, work continues, because survival demands it, but the rhythm falters. People pause longer at the well, linger in hushed groups after mass, cast glances toward the horizon, as though expecting armored figures to appear at any moment. Even the animals seem uneasy, though perhaps that's only your imagination, stirred by tension in the air. Bread tastes duller, laughter comes slower, and the children play their games a little closer to home. For some, there's a grim excitement. Young men with more bravado than sense boast that they'll return with spoils, or at least with stories fit for the tavern. They imagine themselves wearing helmets, carrying spears, their names sung, though no one ever seems to know who exactly would do the singing. Others, older and more weary, shake their heads. They've seen what war looks like from a peasant's vantage point, and it isn't songs. It's trudging in mud, it's being hungry in a camp, it's returning home to find weeds where wheat once grew. As for the women, they know war differently. If their men are taken, they carry the work-alone fields, children, animals, everything. If strangers march through, they face the danger of soldiers' demands, the uncertainty of whether a knock at the door will be for bread or for something harsher. Whispers of war weigh on them heavily, even if their voices remain quiet. The parish priest offers sermons about faith and trust in God's will. He reminds everyone that kings and lords are placed above by divine order, that battles may rage, but souls endure. It is meant to be comforting, but you notice how his eyes drift, uneasy when he speaks of peace. Even holy men know that prayers don't always stop swords. As the tension grows, you find yourself glancing toward your own small plot of land, wondering who would tend it if you were taken. You look at your family's faces in the dim firelight, memorizing them against the possibility of absence. And you ask yourself the quiet question that no one says aloud. If the Lord calls, do you go? You know the answer, of course. Choice is a luxury you don't possess. But still, the question hangs there, fragile as the smoke that curls above your hearth. Yet life doesn't stop for whispers. Tomorrow you will rise, tend to your work, and hope that this war passes you by like a storm cloud skirting the edge of the village. Hope, after all, is the peasant's armor thin, but better than nothing. And as the days stretch on, you discover that fear is not the only constant companion. Faith remains too, not only in God above, but in the steady rhythm of bells and prayers that hold the village together, even as rumors press at its edges, which of course brings you back to the church, where every whisper of war is balanced by the promise of salvation. And so, we turn next to how belief steadies you, even when the world feels ready to break. It doesn't arrive with warning drums or banners. Illness slides into the village quietly, the way smoke creeps under a door. One day a neighbor's child coughs, just a little more than usual. The next day someone stays in bed longer than the sun allows. Soon you notice fewer footsteps in the fields, fewer faces at the well, and the silence begins to feel heavy, like fog that refuses to lift. In your time, there is no neat word like influenza or infection to explain what's happening. People simply call it a fever or a flux, or perhaps even a curse. It doesn't matter what you name it, the effect is the same. Bodies grow weak, skin turns hot or pale, and the strength you rely on to work the land vanishes as swiftly as dew in sunlight. And for peasants who live life already teetering on the edge of hunger, illness is not a setback. It is a threat that presses at every corner. Your hut, already cramped, now becomes a sick room. Straw bedding soaks up sweat, and the smoky air does little to ease the lungs. There is no sweet relief of medicine, only herbs gathered by women who know which leaves soothe the stomach and which roots help the chest. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and often it is impossible to know why. A sprig of rosemary, a whispered prayer, a charm hung over the bedich is given its chance. Because when the body fails, hope shifts quickly to anything that might restore it. Illness does not respect boundaries. It moves from one household to another, ignoring fences and grudges alike. The same man who quarreled with his neighbor yesterday may find that same neighbor standing in his doorway tomorrow, carrying a cup of broth. For all the gossip and bickering, sickness reminds everyone that survival is a shared burden. If one family is lost, the whole village suffers, for fields go untended and hands disappear from the harvest. Children suffer most cruelly. They are the frailest, their small bodies unable to fight off fevers that grown men sometimes endure. You hear mothers humming lullabies over weak cries, voices cracking under the weight of fear they cannot express. In these moments, you realize how fragile your world truly is. Every life is balanced on a thin reed, swaying in winds you cannot see or control. When illness spreads far and wide, the village feels hollowed. Bells toll for the dead, and funerals blur together until you cannot remember which grave was dug for whom. The priest prays with weary repetition, his words comforting but worn thin by overuse. Even the strongest among you begin to feel a shadow pressing down, the uneasy thought that perhaps God has turned his face away. Yet peasants endure with a peculiar stubbornness. You grieve, yes, but then you rise. Someone must fetch water, someone must feed the animals, someone must dig the graves. Grief becomes part of the rhythm, woven into the same pattern as sowing and reaping. The fields wait for no one, not even the sick or the dead. And so, you press on, shoulders bent, because you know the earth will not pause its demands. The cruelty of sickness lies in its unpredictability. Some recover, rising slowly from their straw mats, gaunt, but alive. Others fade swiftly, leaving nothing but silence and the faint smell of herbs in the air. And through it all, you realize how little control you have over your own body, your own fate. It humbles you, frightens you, and binds you closer to those who endure beside you. And once the sickness passes, because eventually it always does, the village exhales. Survivors gather at the well, exchange weary nods, and life resumes. But the memory lingers like a scar. You carry the reminder that health is fleeting, that the line between life and death is no thicker than the smoke curling from your hearth. It is in these fragile moments, though, that you notice what keeps you tethered, the rituals of the church. The prayers, the festivals, the small reminders that beyond the uncertainty of sickness, there remains a rhythm of faith and community. And so, as illness loosens its grip, you find yourself stepping once more into the familiar shadow of the steeple, where hope is stitched together with belief. After weeks of trudging through mud, after whispers of war and the shadow of sickness, the village finds itself craving something lighter, something that makes life feel more than just survival. Festivals arrive like bright threads woven through a gray cloth, not banishing hardship, but softening its edges. For peasants in medieval France, these celebrations are the moments when time itself loosens, when toil pauses. And when you remember that laughter and music can share space with hunger and fear, the church calendar provides much of the rhythm. Saints' days, holy feasts, Easter, Christmas all arrive with their own traditions, their own excuses to light candles and gather. The village transforms, not with silk banners or golden cups, but with whatever can be managed. Garlands of greenery strung along doorways, simple ribbons woven into hair, extra loaves baked from whatever flour is left in the sack. The changes are small, but they carry weight, like the difference between bare walls and painted ones. Music is everywhere. A fiddle scratches out a tune. A drum beat thumps from a hollowed log. Voices rise in rough harmony. You may not dance gracefully, few do, but you dance anyway. Feet stomp, skirts twirl, children weave between adults with shrieks of delight. The sound of laughter, for once, drowns out the arguments about boundaries or livestock. The air smells of spiced ale, of roasted meat if fortune smiles, or at least of onions frying in fat. It is not a royal banquet, but it feels like one when your belly is usually so modestly filled. Even the games carry a mix of joy and competition. Young men race, leap, and wrestle, eager to prove strength, while others cheer or jeer from the sidelines. Children chase hoops or roll bones for luck, their shrill voices piercing the air like birdsong. For the moment, no one minds the mud on their clothes or the sore muscles tomorrow will bring. The laughter matters more. And then, there are the small indulgences. Honey cakes appear, sticky and rare, treasured like jewels before being devoured in sticky-fingered haste. Ale flows a little more freely, loosening tongues and warming spirits. For some perhaps too freely, leading to bold boasts, silly songs, and the occasional brawl that ends more in bruised pride than real harm. But even quarrels in the glow of festival firelight feel softer, easier to forget. What strikes you most, though, is how much these festivals remind everyone of their humanity. Day after day you toil like part of the landscape, another beast bent under the sun. But on festival days, you are more than labor. You are a dancer, a singer, a storyteller. We're part of something larger than the grind of seasons, tied not only to the land but to the people beside you. Joy is rare, yes, but when it comes it glimmers all the brighter for being scarce. And when the festival ends, as it always must, you carry its memory back into your hut. The fields will call you at dawn, the Lord will demand his due, and gossip will resume its endless circulation. But the faint taste of honey lingers on your tongue, the echo of music hums in your ears, you feel off. Only for a little while that life is more than toil. It is these moments, fleeting and fragile, that allow the village to keep moving forward. Without them, the weight of war, sickness, and hunger might crush even the stoutest heart. With them, even a peasant can glimpse joy. And as the festival fire burns down into glowing embers, you know that tomorrow, those same embers will warm your hut, tying merriment back to the daily rhythm of survival. Of course, not all rhythms are so joyful. For the very landscape you live in, the forests, rivers, and fields, has moods of its own. And you learn quickly that nature, like a lord, can be generous one day and merciless the next. The seasons are not polite backdrops in your world. They are your calendar, your ruler, and at times your executioner. You do not mark the passage of time by neat numbers on a page, but by how the earth feels beneath your feet, by the smell of the air, by the way the light slants across the fields. Each shift brings both gifts and burdens, and you learn to live in their rhythm, whether you welcome them or not. Spring comes first, the season of mud. Snow melts into muck, and every step is a squelch. Your shoes, if you're lucky enough to have them, grow heavy with wet earth, but hope rises with the season. Lambs bleat in the pastures, green shoots push through the ground, and you find yourself daring to imagine bread that is more than a crust's width thick. There is hard work, yes, plowing, sowing, endless bending and digging, but in spring, the work tastes faintly of promise. Then comes summer, the sun pressing down like a stern overseer. Days stretch long, and so does your labor. You swing scythes through tall grass, sweat dripping into your eyes, while insects circle in ceaseless clouds. It is hot, punishing, relentless, but in every bundle of hay, you sense the assurance of winter fodder. The evenings are softer, the hum of crickets, the cool relief of ale after a blistering day, the faint smell of fields still warm from the sun. Summer is exhausting, but also generous, offering fruit, milk, and a rare moment to lie on your back in the grass and breathe. Autumn is harvest, the season of frantic gathering, of wagons creaking under weight, of hands raw from pulling and cutting. The whole village throws itself into the task, because every grain, every cabbage, every turnip dug from the soil is a small victory against the hunger to come. The air grows sharp, carrying wood smoke and damp leaves, and the sky seems to brood lower each day. There is relief in the bounty piled high, but also dread, for you know how quickly full stores can shrink under the long shadow of winter. And then winter, the season of waiting. The world outside your hut is silent, white, and merciless. You huddle near the fire, measuring wood and food with anxious care. Nights stretch endlessly, the cold pressing in even through your layered wool. Work continues. Animals must be fed, water broken from frozen wells. But the pace slows, and time itself feels heavy. Hunger gnaws at your belly when the stores grow thin, and illness lurks in the chill air. Yet winter also brings its strange comforts. Stories told by the fire. Moments of stillness under a night sky pricked with stars. The rare joy of a festival where warmth and song push back against the darkness. Each season carves itself into you, shaping not just your work, but your mood, your prayers, your very sense of time. Turning is inevitable, unstoppable. And in some ways, comforting. You know that after the harshest winter, spring will always return, muddy and alive. It is this cycle, more than any lord or priest, that governs your life. The seasons dictate your meals, your sleep, your health, even your quarrels and your joys. And while you may grumble at the cold or curse the rain, deep down you know the truth. Without their rhythm, you would not endure. But the seasons are not the only forces you must navigate. Beyond the turn of weather lies the weight of obligation, the taxes, dues, and demands that cling as stubbornly as mud to your boots. And so, as the snow melts and spring calls you back to the fields, you find yourself once again measuring not just the soil's yield, but the portion that will be claimed by those above you. Most days, your world stretches no farther than the fields, the forest's edge, and the muddy path to the church. The horizon feels like a wall. Why look beyond it, when survival demands your hands here and now? And yet, even in your small village, whispers drift in from the wider kingdom. They come with traveling merchants, with passing pilgrims, with the occasional messenger who rides through, raising more dust than answers. You are reminded, again and again, that your life is just one stitch in a much larger tapestry. Beyond your hedgerows lies a kingdom of castles and cities, cathedrals that scrape the sky, and lords who argue with kings about who commands whom. None of it belongs to you, not really, but its weight presses down all the same. A decree made in a faraway hall will ripple through your hut, perhaps in the form of higher taxes or new rules about tithes, or an order to provide men for some quarrel fought miles away. Sometimes the kingdom appears almost mythical. Stories of Paris reach your ear streets so crowded that a man could walk all day, and never leave them towers so tall they vanish into clouds, markets bursting with goods you cannot even picture. Spices, silks, glass goblets, books written in ink rather than carved in wood. You try to imagine it all, but the effort is like trying to picture the moon's surface. It feels unreal, more dream than fact. And yet, reminders of that faraway grandeur do pass through. Coins stamped with the king's face find their way into the village, though rarely into your hands. The parish priest occasionally quotes edicts, reminding you that the monarch rules not just nobles but you as well. On feast days, prayers are said for the safety of our sovereign Lord, even though you've never laid eyes on him and likely never will. Still, his shadow stretches across your life as surely as your hut's roof beams stretch overhead. What is more real to you are the wandering souls who carry fragments of that wider kingdom. A pilgrim with a staff and shell badge trudging toward some distant shrine, a traveling jongler, pausing to strum a tune in the village square. A tinker selling wares, his stories more polished than his goods. They bring color, distraction, and the faint reminder that there is a world beyond your rut of sowing and reaping. For a moment, you are transported, only to return to the rhythm of chores once they've vanished down the road. But make no mistake, the kingdom beyond is not just a backdrop. It is a force that shapes you. Wars you don't choose, taxes you can't refuse, lords you can't reshoal, trickle downward from that unseen world. Sometimes you wish the village were an island, left untouched. But you know deep down that even the most remote hamlet is tangled in the kingdom's web. And so, as you stand at the edge of your fields and look toward the fading horizon, you carry both a strange comfort and a quiet unease. Comfort, because your life is small, and smallness can mean safety. Unease, because when kingdoms shift, even the smallest lives can be tossed about like dry leaves in a storm. Still, tomorrow, you will rise with the dawn, shoulder your tools, and return to the soil. For though kingdoms beyond may change banners and kings, the earth beneath your feet remains steady, and it is in that earth where your true world lies. Yet, as steady as the soil may seem, even it is never fully yours. For looming over every harvest, every loaf of bread, and every jug of ale is the certainty of dues owed, those inevitable burdens that tie your small world to powers far greater. And so we turn now to the weight of taxes, tithes, and the endless hunger of those above. And so you have wandered through the long day of a medieval villager's life. You have woken in the smoky darkness of a hut, shared your space with animals, tasted the thin gruel, worked the soil with tools, heavy in the hand, and bowed your head beneath the eyes of lords and priests alike. You've endured hunger and sickness, but also laughed at gossip, found warmth in festivals, and felt the turning of seasons bind you to the rhythm of the earth. Beyond your small village, you've sensed the vast kingdom, distant, powerful, and forever shaping your days. Kings, wars, taxes, all ripple through your life, even though your hands are forever in the mud of your own field. What's remarkable is not the glory, for there is little but the endurance. Your world is one of survival, of repetition, of finding small joys in between the weight of obligations. Yet in that quiet persistence, there is a kind of nobility, a different kind of strength, the strength to keep sowing, to keep harvesting, to keep living despite the fleas, the drafts, and the endless demands of those above. And now, as the village settles into silence, as the fires burn low and the night air presses in, finally lay down again upon your straw mattress. If you curl beneath your rough wool blanket, the day's aches sinking into the dark. Beyond the hut, the fields rest, the animals quiet, the church bell silent. The kingdom may stretch wide, with crowns and castles and wars and walls, but for you, sleep is your kingdom now. Rest, then. Tomorrow, the same sun will rise, and the same fields will wait. But for now, let the burdens slip away and drift gently into the calm of forgotten centuries. Good night.